I never thought humiliation could come wrapped in silk and champagne, served alongside overpriced canapés at my younger sister Sophia's wedding. There I sat, third row, feeling like an imposter in the only formal dress I owned, while polished guests mingled effortlessly in the grand flower-filled reception hall. Beside me, my 8-year-old son Noah fidgeted in his new gray suit, a 2-paycheck splurge I'd justified by hoping today might offer a sliver of belonging. His eyes were wide with the fairy tale magic of it all, believing, perhaps, that this union might finally mend the fractures in our family. Sophia, the radiant bride, moved through the room like the star she always was, effortlessly charming, beautiful, adored by everyone, especially our mother Eleanor. Sophia always commanded the spotlight. I learned early on how to live comfortably in the shadows, how to manage the constant comparisons. Still, I came. For Noah, maybe for some foolish, lingering hope within myself. I smiled until my cheeks ached. I clapped on cue. I kept my voice light and steady when navigating the inevitable, probing questions from distant relatives. "You're Olivia, the older sister? Goodness, you don't look like you have an 8-year-old." As if my existence as a mother were some unfortunate condition. Then came the speeches. The best man delivered a few light-hearted, predictable jokes, drawing waves of polite laughter. Then, Sophia stepped up to the microphone, holding her delicate crystal flute, the picture of bridal perfection. The room quieted instantly. My breath hitched. Perhaps a sweet anecdote about our childhood? A conciliatory remark? A simple, kind word? I should have known better than to hope. After thanking her guests effusively, her gaze swept the room and seemed to land near our table. "And of course," she began, her smile firmly, dazzlingly in place, "I have to say something special about my big sister Olivia." Noah looked up at me, his face bright with anticipation. I managed a small smile back at him. "She's been such a role model," Sophia purred, the subtle emphasis on the word sending a warning signal down my spine. "A single mom, you know. So strong, so independent." She paused, letting the silence stretch for dramatic effect before delivering the punchline with practiced saccharine sweetness. "And clearly unwanted by anyone else." Laughter exploded through the room, loud, immediate, uninhibited. My stomach plummeted, twisting into a painful knot. Had I heard that correctly? It felt surreal, impossible. But Sophia just kept smiling, basking in the reaction as if she'd delivered the wittiest toast of the century. Before the shock could fully register, before I could even process the cruelty, our mother Eleanor chimed in from her prominent table, her voice carrying clearly across the room, ensuring no one missed her contribution. "Oh, she's a used product, darling," she announced with a theatrical air, "but looks remarkably good for her age." More laughter erupted, louder this time, sharper, stripped of any pretense of humor, laced with undeniable malice. My face flushed, burning hot from my neck to my hairline. It felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. With every ounce of willpower I possessed, I fought back the tears threatening to spill, locking my jaw. Not here, not now, not in front of Noah, not to give them the satisfaction. He tugged urgently at my sleeve, his small, clear whisper cutting through the noise like a shard of glass. "Why did she say that about you, Mama? What does she mean?" His innocent confusion, the dawning hurt clouding his bright eyes. That was the blow that shattered me far more than their calculated venom. I looked around wildly, desperately searching the sea of faces for a lifeline, a single compassionate gaze, an ally. But I found only averted eyes, quickly hidden smirks, or cold indifference. My grandfather, Arthur, suddenly seemed fascinated by his dinner plate. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone, pinned like an insect under the weight of their collective amusement and disdain. How could they turn a celebration into such a public execution? And how could I possibly shield my son from this? The elegant room felt like it was closing in, the laughter echoing in my ears. Just as I instinctively gripped Noah's hand, ready to flee, regardless of the scene it might cause, A chair scraped loudly against the polished floor at the head table. Ethan, the groom, Sophia's perfect polished fiancé, was standing up. His face wasn't amused. It was stone. The laughter died instantly, replaced by a sudden, heavy silence. Something was about to break. If stories about finding unexpected allies and standing tall against cruelty speak to you, make sure you subscribe to Life Stories, because Olivia's ordeal and her path forward was just beginning. People often think being the older sibling means you lead the way, that you're automatically looked up to, revered even. But in my family, I wasn't the trailblazer. I felt more like a cautionary tale, a living example of what not to do, especially compared to my younger sister Sophia. My name is Olivia. I'm 34, a single mother, and definitively the black sheep of the Mitchell family, though they prefer words like disappointment or struggler whispered behind cupped hands at holidays. I live with my son Noah in a small, sometimes drafty, two-bedroom apartment on the far edge of town, the part that doesn't make it into the glossy city brochures. Noah is 8, and he is, without question, the brightest, kindest, most wonderful thing that has ever happened to me. He's the anchor in my often turbulent world, and honestly, the only reason I ever found myself willingly walking back into rooms filled with people who specialize in making me feel infinitesimally small, rooms like Sophia's wedding reception. Life isn't glamorous. It's a constant juggle. I work 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Mornings are spent breathing in the scent of burnt coffee and serving pastries with a forced smile at a local downtown cafe. Nights often find me behind the front desk of a small, slightly faded hotel near the airport, dealing with tired travelers and checking reservations until the early hours. There's no trust fund, no safety net, just the relentless rhythm of work, bills, and trying to carve out precious moments with Noah. But it's my life, built with my own hands. I make Noah his favorite dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Saturday mornings. I know how to expertly sew patches onto the knees of his rapidly worn-out jeans. And sometimes, when I tuck him in at night, he wraps his arms around my neck and tells me I'm his superhero. In those moments, none of the rest matters. That's all the fuel I need to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Unfortunately, in the eyes of my family, particularly my mother, Eleanor, being a single mom wasn't a testament to strength. It was the ultimate badge of failure. Eleanor lives and breathes appearances, status, reputation, the family name. Those are her gods. She made sure I felt the weight of my perceived failure at every birthday, every holiday dinner, every brief, strained phone call. That's why Sophia's wedding, her marriage to the successful, polished Ethan, was touted by Mom as a second chance for the family name, a chance to erase the smudge mark that was my life. Sophia is 5 years younger than me, and she is everything I'm not in Mom's eyes. Beautiful, effortlessly successful in her marketing career, always seeming to have everything fall perfectly into place, and possessing an uncanny ability to make even handed-down advantages look like hard-won victories. She's the golden child. Eleanor worships her. If Sophia merely sneezed, Mom would materialize with a silk handkerchief and cooing sounds of concern. If I got the flu, I was told to take some extra vitamins and stop being so dramatic. The real chasm opened when I got pregnant with Noah. I was 25, newly, deeply in love with a man who swore up and down he'd stand by me, that we'd build a life together. Then, around month 5 of my pregnancy, he vanished. No note, no phone call, no explanation. Just gone. Empty apartment, disconnected number. My family's reaction? Not concern, not offers of help. Just a heavy, suffocating silence punctuated by thinly veiled judgment and the occasional cutting, "I told you so," from Eleanor. They didn't ask questions, they just assumed the worst of me, again. But then I had Noah, and the first time I held that tiny, perfect baby in my arms, listening to his soft breaths, every cruel word, every judgmental glance, every whispered criticism faded into insignificant white noise. He was mine, and I would move heaven and earth for him. Still, deep down, Buried beneath the scars and the hard-won independence, a stubborn flicker of hope persisted. Maybe, eventually, they would see me. Not just Olivia the single mom, but Olivia, their daughter, their sister, someone worthy of love and respect, regardless of my circumstances. Maybe that's why, when Sophia's ostentatious wedding invitation arrived, thick cardstock, embossed lettering, I found myself saying yes. I accepted despite not being asked to be in the bridal party, despite my name being subtly misspelled on the RSVP card, an oversight I knew wasn't accidental. Despite having to rent a dress I couldn't really afford, and doing my own hair and makeup in my cramped bathroom mirror, while Noah practiced smiling formally in his little clip-on tie. I told myself I was going for closure. I told myself it was important for Noah to see his aunt get married. I even briefly, foolishly, allowed myself to wonder if this opulent event was their way, however clumsy, of extending a quiet, unspoken olive branch after years of strained silence. Looking back from the wreckage of that reception speech, that hope felt almost painfully naive. Walking into the wedding venue felt like stepping onto a movie set. Everything was breathtakingly perfect, almost unreal. White roses cascaded from elaborate centerpieces. Gold-accented tableware gleamed under the soft glow of recessed lighting, and somewhere in the distance, the melancholic strains of a string quartet drifted through the air, weaving a tapestry of sophisticated romance. It was the kind of effortless elegance my mother, Eleanor, adored, and my sister Sophia inhabited so naturally, like a second skin. Sophia herself looked like she'd stepped directly out of a high-fashion bridal magazine editorial. Her designer dress was a cloud of white tulle and intricate beadwork, her dark hair swept up in a flawless chignon, her smile radiant and practiced as she basked in the deluge of compliments and camera flashes. She was the undisputed star, soaking in every moment. When she eventually glided past our little standing spot near the entrance, flanked by giggling bridesmaids, her smile faltered for just a microsecond as her eyes landed on me. "Olivia, you made it!" she exclaimed, her voice pitched slightly too high, managing to convey surprise rather than genuine welcome. It felt less like a greeting and more like an observation that defied her expectations. Her eyes flickered down to Noah, who was gazing up at her with unabashed 8-year-old admiration. "He's getting big," she added dismissively, a cursory remark before she was swept away by another wave of fawning well-wishers. There was no hug, no brief squeeze of the arm, no real warmth exchanged, just the bare minimum of acknowledgement before she eagerly returned to her spotlight. My mother, Eleanor, offered even less. She walked directly past me later, on her way to greet some important-looking couple, her gaze fixed straight ahead, her posture rigid, as if I were merely part of the venue's decor, or worse, simply not there at all. The cut was so deliberate, so complete in its dismissal, it momentarily stole my breath. A familiar pang of invisibility tightening my chest. But then I looked down at Noah. His face was utterly luminous with excitement, untouched by the undercurrents he was too young to perceive. He tugged urgently at my hand, whispering loudly with pure delight, "Mommy, look! That giant chandelier looks like a giant crystal spaceship." A moment later, watching Sophia laugh across the room, he sighed contentedly. "Aunt Sophia looks like a real princess from my storybook." Seeing that pure, uncomplicated joy shining in his eyes solidified my resolve. I would stay. I would endure the familiar ache of not belonging, the subtle and not-so-subtle slights that felt like tiny paper cuts, just so he could have this memory, this brief immersion in a fairy tale his own sometimes hardscrabble life rarely provided. I plastered on my polite, practiced smile, the one single mom's perfect, and navigated us through the high, glittering, champagne-sipping crowd towards the seating chart. It was a large, ornately framed board near the ballroom entrance, displaying table assignments in elegant calligraphy. My eyes scanned the meticulously arranged names. Mitchell. Ah, there it was. Table 9, tucked away in the furthest, darkest corner of the expansive room, nestled rather conspicuously near the constantly swinging doors that led to the restrooms and the kitchen service area. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh under my breath. Fitting, of course. Strategic placement for the family's black sheep. We made our way to the table, the furthest possible point from the elevated head table, where Sophia, her new husband Ethan, and my mother held court like royalty. We ate our elegantly presented salads in relative silence, the string quartet providing a pleasant enough backdrop. I helped Noah meticulously dab at a smudge of chocolate mousse that had somehow migrated onto his clip-on tie during dessert, murmuring quiet reassurances and trying to ignore the faint clatter emanating from the nearby kitchen doors. Throughout the meal, I kept my gaze mostly lowered, focusing on my son, making small talk with him about his favorite part of the ceremony, consciously avoiding eye contact with Eleanor across the vast room. Though I could feel her occasional sharp, assessing glances land on me, I tried to tune out the snippets of conversation drifting from nearby tables, especially when I thought I heard my name whispered, or maybe I imagined it, amidst the clinking of glasses and bursts of polite laughter. Just get through this, I chanted silently to myself. Smile, be invisible, let Noah enjoy the spectacle, and then slip away quietly before anything else can happen. Then, the overhead lights dimmed slightly, signaling a shift. The master of ceremonies, a jovial man with a booming voice, stepped up to the microphone near the dance floor. His voice echoed cheerfully as he announced the commencement of the traditional wedding speeches. My stomach gave a sudden, nervous lurch. The best man went first, followed by Ethan's beaming father. Their toasts were warm, generic, filled with predictable sentiments about love and future happiness. And then, the MC introduced the maid of honor, who happened to also be the bride. And now, let's hear a few words from the beautiful bride herself, Sophia. As Sophia gracefully rose from her seat and approached the microphone, bathed once again in the warm, adoring glow of the spotlight, that familiar, unwelcome mix of dread and that stubborn, illogical kernel of hope washed over me. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe. Sophia stood there, poised and radiant, holding the champagne flute like a scepter. The room was hushed, all eyes on her. She smiled that dazzling smile, pausing just long enough to ensure maximum attention. I want to thank all of you for being here, she began, her voice smooth and melodious. It's truly the happiest day of my life, and I feel so incredibly blessed to be surrounded by the people who mean absolutely everything to me. I watched from our table in the back, table 9, trying desperately to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, I was included in that everyone. Noah, beside me, was perched on the edge of his chair, legs kicking slightly, completely enchanted by the whole glittering spectacle. Sophia continued, speaking sweetly about her new husband, Ethan, about the magic of love, the serendipity of timing, the beauty of fate. For a moment, I actually relaxed my shoulders slightly. Perhaps this speech wouldn't turn into the public critique I half dreaded. Maybe she had matured. Maybe this marriage had softened her. Then her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. And of course, she said, her smile turning slightly sly, knowing, I want to give a special shout-out to my big sister, Olivia. A nearby spotlight seemed to subtly shift, or maybe it was just my imagination, but I could feel eyes turning towards our corner of the room. I instinctively sat up a little straighter, smoothed my dress, and fixed a polite, neutral smile on my face. Here it comes, I thought. You've always been such a strong example, Olivia, Sophia continued, her voice light, almost playful, but with an underlying edge I knew all too well. Honestly, she's the bravest woman I know. A murmur of agreeable appreciation went through some nearby tables. Sophia leaned slightly into the microphone. She raised a child completely on her own. No husband, no partner, just her. She paused dramatically. And well, she added with a conspiratorial wink, whoever was kind enough to babysit along the way. A few scattered chuckles rippled through the room. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. Here we go. But seriously, Sophia added quickly, as if sharing an admirable feat. It's truly incredible how she's managed all these years. Another pause, building the moment, her eyes scanning the crowd before landing back near me. A single mom. She let the words hang. Unwanted by anyone, but still showing up. And then the dam broke. Laughter, real, loud, unfiltered laughter, erupted around the room. It wasn't polite chuckles. It was guffaws, hoots, people turning to each other, shaking their heads in amusement. I felt the breath physically leave my body, as if punched. My cheeks flushed searingly hot. My hands, resting in my lap, froze around the twisted linen napkin. I glanced sideways at Noah. His smile had vanished, replaced by a deep frown of confusion. He was looking around the room, his eyes wide, trying to understand why all these smiling, well-dressed people were suddenly laughing so hard at his mom. And then came the final, crushing blow. My own mother, Eleanor, practically radiating malicious glee, laughed louder than anyone. She leaned towards her tablemates, ensuring her voice would carry just loud enough. "She's a used product, darling," she declared, the words sharp as shards of ice. "But she still polishes up quite well, don't you think?" Another wave of laughter crashed over me, harsher this time, colder, the kind that didn't even bother trying to hide its cruelty. My vision blurred for a second. It felt exactly like being slapped hard across the face, except no one had laid a hand on me. They didn't need to. The collective mockery, the public shaming disguised as a wedding toast, did the job far more effectively. It felt like everyone was staring, their amusement confirming my deepest fears, that they saw me not as a sister, a daughter, a guest, but as a punchline, a failure, a cautionary tale. Like being alone, like raising my son with everything I had, somehow made me less worthy, inherently laughable. I looked down at Noah again. He had leaned into me now, his small hand gripping my arm, his whisper barely audible above the fading laughter. "Why did she say that, Mama? What does used product mean? Why are they laughing?" I wanted to answer him, to shield him, to tell him none of it was true, that he was perfect, that we were enough. But I couldn't find the words. My throat was closed tight. I couldn't protect him from this venom, couldn't shield his innocent heart from the way our own family viewed his mother. And that pain, seeing his confusion morph into hurt, that helplessness, that was far worse than any insult hurled my way. My heart raced frantically. I looked desperately around the room again, searching for an escape route, scanning faces for just one ally, one person who might step in, one person who might simply meet my gaze with kindness instead of judgment. But there was no one. People looked uncomfortable now, perhaps, but they didn't speak. They studiously examined their wine glasses, their dessert plates, their phones. Even Grandfather Arthur, seated near the head table, the man who used to bounce me on his knee and call me his little lion when I was a child, kept his gaze firmly fixed on the tablecloth in front of him. He was there, but in that moment, he wasn't with me. I was utterly, completely alone again, exposed under the harsh lights with my bewildered son. The laughter had mostly subsided, leaving behind a thick, suffocating silence, pregnant with unspoken judgment. The silence that followed the laughter felt heavy, thick with malice and unspoken judgment. I sat there, pinned to my chair near the restrooms, Noah's small hand still gripping my arm, his innocent question, "Why are they laughing?" "Marcy," echoing in my ears. I could have endured the insults, the snide remarks, the casual cruelty, if it were just directed at me. I'd spent years developing a thick skin, learning to absorb their barbs and carry on. I could have plastered on that brittle smile one last time, taken Noah firmly by the hand, and walked out quietly, head held high, preserving some semblance of dignity. But seeing the raw confusion clouding my son's eyes, seeing him try to reconcile the princess aunt and the laughing crowd with the mother he knew and trusted, that cracked something deep inside me. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about him. I couldn't let him sit there and absorb this poison. Couldn't let him believe that this was acceptable, that this was what family meant. Not because I suddenly felt brave, not because I wanted to make a scene or demand an apology I knew would never come, but simply because I needed to get us out. I needed air that wasn't thick with mockery. I needed to breathe without choking on the shame they were so generously showering upon me. My hands were trembling, but a different kind of energy surged through me now. Protective, fierce. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the polished floor in the sudden quiet. I reached for Noah's other hand, preparing to stand, to make our escape. And then, from the head table, another chair scraped, even louder. Every head snapped in that direction. Ethan, the groom, Sophia's perfect, polished husband-to-be, stood up slowly. He looked pale, his jaw clenched tight. He didn't look amused. He didn't glance at Sophia beside him, who now looked startled. He didn't survey the guests. His eyes, intense and unwavering, went straight across the room and locked onto mine. Something in his face, a gravity I hadn't seen before, made the entire room freeze, holding its collective breath. In that instant, suspended in time, I knew something significant was about to happen. Not a rescue, perhaps, not a brawl, but a reckoning. Ethan calmly reached over and took the microphone from Sophia's suddenly limp grasp. She opened her mouth slightly, as if to protest, but no sound came out. The room was utterly silent now. It was like the air conditioning had kicked into overdrive, dropping the temperature several degrees. No more laughter, no more whispers, just this heavy, expectant stillness. I paused, halfway out of my seat, Noah's hand clutched tight in mine. For a second, I thought maybe he'd try to smooth things over, make another joke, say something charming, but ultimately hollow, to diffuse the excruciating tension. That's what people usually did in my family. Brush the ugliness under the rug, pretend it didn't happen, call the cruelty humor or tradition. But that's not what Ethan did. He didn't smile. His face remained tight, etched with something I couldn't quite decipher. Anger, yes, but also a profound disappointment, a kind of disbelief. His voice, when he finally spoke, wasn't loud, but it was low, firm, and carried absolute authority, cutting through the silence. "I can't," he began, his gaze still fixed on me, though his words were for the room. "I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened." He paused, letting the simple statement land. "I won't stand up here and let that kind of deliberate cruelty pass as wedding comedy." A collective intake of breath swept the room. He stepped out from behind the head table and began to walk slowly, purposefully, towards our table in the back corner. He wasn't rushing. Each step seemed measured, as if he were pushing against the weight of the room's discomfort and shock. He stopped a few feet away, taking in the scene. Me, Noah, the remnants of our hastily cleared salad plates. He looked directly at the assembled guests, his voice steady. "I've heard a lot about the importance of family over the past year while planning this wedding," he said evenly. "About appearances, about tradition, about loyalty. But what I just witnessed, that wasn't family. That was mockery dressed up as celebration. That was bullying." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. People glanced nervously at Eleanor. Others stared intently into their drinks, suddenly finding the melting ice fascinating. No one spoke. Then, Ethan turned his gaze directly onto Sophia. "You mocked your own sister," he stated, his voice devoid of affection, "for being a single mother, for raising her child without the help you've always taken for granted. You laughed about her being unwanted, and worse, you made her son sit here and watch it happen." Sophia visibly flinched, opening her mouth again, perhaps to offer a defense, an excuse, but no sound emerged. She looked small, diminished, stripped of her usual sparkle under his unwavering stare. Ethan didn't wait for a reply. He turned back to the silent watching room. "Olivia didn't stand here to defend herself," he continued. "She didn't ask for sympathy. She's clearly never needed a stage or a spotlight to prove her worth. But I will not stay silent, because if this is what it means to marry into this family, if this family thinks cruelty is humor, and finds entertainment in shame, then I seriously need to reconsider what kind of man I want to be and what kind of life I want to build. A stunned gasp rippled through the guests. A woman at the next table whispered audibly, "Oh my God, is this real?" Someone dropped a fork with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Noah looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. I didn't know what to do, what to feel. I had come here expecting, at best, to survive the evening with my dignity frayed but intact. I never, ever expected to be defended. Certainly not like this. Not so publicly. Not by him. Ethan then looked down at my son, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. He gave Noah the briefest, softest nod. "Your mom," he said, his voice gentle but clear, "is the strongest person in this room. Don't you ever forget that." With one final sweeping glance at the stunned crowd, he added, "I think I've seen enough tonight." And with that, he carefully placed the microphone down on the edge of our table, turned his back on everyone, on Sophia, on Eleanor, on the entire wedding, and walked without another word or backward glance, straight out of the reception hall door. The moment Ethan walked out of the reception hall, it was as if someone had hit a universal pause button. The heavy oak door swung shut behind him, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt louder than the earlier laughter. No one clapped. No one cheered his departure or decried it. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning, and somewhere, the faint, solitary clink of a spoon nervously hitting a glass. The crowd remained frozen, a tableau of shock and discomfort. Eyes darted nervously between me, standing by the abandoned microphone at table 9, then to Sophia at the head table, utterly exposed, and finally to the empty doorway Ethan had just disappeared through. Sophia stood rigid, her perfect posture finally crumbling. Her shoulders sagged, her carefully constructed bridal radiance extinguished, replaced by a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. She looked around helplessly, but the faces staring back at her weren't smiling anymore. The adoration was gone. Some looked shocked, others deeply embarrassed, and a few, I noted with grim satisfaction, looked genuinely angry. Not at Ethan, but clearly, finally, at her and my mother. Predictably, it was Eleanor who broke the spell, who couldn't stand the loss of control. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching violently against the polished floor, the sound jarring in the stillness. "Well," she snapped, her voice sharp but lacking its usual commanding resonance. "What an ungrateful, dramatic boy. He completely embarrassed you, Sophia, in front of everyone. Typical. Just like your sister. Selfish, the both of them." But her words fell flat this time. The power she usually wielded over rooms like this, the authority that made people shrink or nod in deference, had vanished along with Ethan. Her accusations echoed hollowly. Easy, failing to ignite indignation or rally support. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the need to respond or defend myself. For the first time in what felt like my entire life, I didn't feel small under the weight of her voice. My focus was solely on Noah. I turned to him, kneeling slightly to meet his wide, questioning eyes. "Are we leaving now, Mama?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling just a little. "Yes, baby," I said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. My own voice felt surprisingly steady. "We're going home." I stood tall, taller than I'd felt in years, took his small hand firmly in mine, and began walking towards the exit. A path seemed to clear for us as we moved. People shifted awkwardly out of our way, some avoiding my eyes entirely, others offering fleeting glances filled with pity or perhaps reluctant admiration. No one spoke to us. Halfway across the large room, near the grand entrance, I heard a soft voice call my name. "Olivia!" I paused and turned. It was my grandfather, Arthur. He looked pale, older than he had just hours before, his eyes rimmed with red. He had pushed his chair back and stood slowly, hesitantly stepping towards me, away from the heavy silence of his table. "I'm sorry, Livy," he said. his voice soft, shaky with emotion, using my childhood nickname. I should have said something, should have stopped it, years ago. I looked into his watery eyes and saw not malice, but a lifetime of quiet complicity, of fear. I simply nodded, unable to trust my own voice. I didn't hate him for his silence then or now. I understood, perhaps too well, what silence could cost some people. I'd lived that cost myself. But while I wasn't angry, I wasn't interested in carrying their guilt anymore either. That burden wasn't mine to bear. Outside, the evening air felt cool and blessedly clean against my hot cheeks. It felt like washing something away. Noah squeezed my hand as we walked towards my old car parked at the edge of the lot. "Is the wedding over, Mama?" he asked, looking back towards the brightly lit venue. I looked down at him, managed a small, genuine smile. "Yeah, sweetie," I said softly. "I think it ended exactly how it needed to." We drove home mostly in silence, the car radio off. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a thoughtful one. I tucked him into bed that night, gave him an extra long hug, and lingered by his door, just listening to his steady breathing. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely calm, lighter somehow. Then I saw my phone. A dozen missed calls, unknown numbers, distant cousins, even a couple of wedding guests I barely knew. I ignored them. Then a text message buzzed. It was from Sarah, a supportive friend who had also, unfortunately, been a guest at the wedding. Her message was short and explosive. "Someone recorded Ethan's entire speech last night. It's on Facebook. Over 50,000 views already. Olivia, you need to see the comments. People are furious for you." With trembling fingers, I found the video. There it was. The opulent room, the stunned faces, Ethan's calm, unwavering voice, cutting through the tension, defending me, defending decency. And there I was, frozen in the frame, holding Noah's hand. I scrolled down. The comments section was a flood of outrage and support. "This man is a king." "Good for him for walking out. That bride and mother are disgusting. She deserves so much better." I'm crying watching this. Every single mom out there just got a little bit of justice. I didn't cry reading them. I didn't smile either. I just felt still, like a tightly wound spring inside me that I'd been carrying for decades had finally, irrevocably, let go. Later that week, I heard through Sarah that Sophia was trying desperately to spin the narrative, claiming Ethan overreacted, that it was all just a poorly landed joke, that people were being too sensitive. But the video, the raw truth of it, had already landed. No one was laughing anymore. A few days after that, a small, unassuming bouquet of wildflowers, sturdy, resilient blooms like daisies and Queen Anne's lace, showed up at my apartment door. There was no sender's name, just a small, simple card tucked inside that read, "To the Lioness." I didn't need to ask who it was from. The wedding itself never concluded, but something far more important did. For once, I wasn't the one left holding the bag of shame. I wasn't the one scrambling to explain or apologize. I had walked out of that room with my son, my reclaimed dignity, and my head held unequivocally high. And someone else, someone completely unexpected, had reminded a room full of people, and apparently a sizable chunk of the internet, what strength, and love, and basic human decency actually look like. It's been 6 months since the wedding that never actually happened. 6 months since Ethan walked out, leaving behind a shattered reception and a viral video that echoed far beyond those banquet hall walls. Sophia and Ethan officially, quietly, called off the engagement not long after. There was no public statement, no social media drama trying to explain or excuse, just a silent erasure of what was supposed to be their perfect beginning. Sophia eventually resurfaced in her usual affluent social circles, attempting, I heard, to carry on as if nothing significant had occurred, though friends reported a certain noticeable chill had replaced her usual effortless sparkle. The photos from that night, predictably, vanished from her carefully curated online presence. She hasn't reached out to me. Not a text, not an email, not a call. Honestly, after everything, I didn't expect her to. Our mother, Eleanor, did call once, about a month after the incident. It wasn't to apologize, of course. That would have required a level of self-awareness I suspected she didn't possess. It was to inform me, in her iciest, most disappointed tone, that I had embarrassed the family, that I had somehow mishandled the situation by not simply laughing along with their cruelty, that I had caused Ethan's dramatic outburst. I listened, truly listened this time, not with hurt or anger, but with a detached clarity, hearing the same old blame-shifting narrative, the same refusal to acknowledge her own toxic contribution. I let her speak for perhaps the first 30 seconds. Then, I did something I never thought I'd have the strength or the right to do. I calmly interrupted her mid-sentence. "Mom," I said, my voice quiet but unwavering, steady in a way that surprised even me. "I'm not your scapegoat anymore. Not for this, not for anything." And then, without waiting for the inevitable sputtering reply, I gently hung up the phone. It wasn't an angry act, it wasn't dramatic. It was just clean, simple, final. A quiet closing of a door that should have been shut years ago. In that moment, hanging up the phone, I realized with startling clarity that I didn't need a grand apology from any of them. Not Sophia, not Eleanor, not even Grandfather Arthur. I didn't need them to suddenly experience an epiphany, change their ways, or magically recognize my worth. What I needed, desperately, was to stop waiting for their permission to see it, and claim it for myself. My life didn't magically transform overnight into some unrecognizable fairy tale. I still work my 2 jobs, sometimes pulling exhausting double shifts to make ends meet. I still count pennies at the grocery store checkout line near the end of the month. I still sometimes make 2 different dinners, because Noah desperately wants pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and I desperately need something green and leafy. The external circumstances haven't drastically changed, but I have. I carry myself differently now. I walk taller, my shoulders back, not hunched under the invisible weight of years of quiet shame and unspoken criticism. I don't automatically shrink or apologize, or try to fade into the background when I enter a room anymore. That internal shift, that quiet reclaiming of my own space and worth, has been more profound and life-altering than any external validation could ever be. Noah's changed too, in subtle but significant ways. He asks more questions now, smart, thoughtful questions, about why some people choose to be cruel when kindness is an option, and why others choose to be brave and speak up, even when it's scary or difficult. He still sometimes talks about Ethan like he's a real-life Marvel hero, occasionally staging elaborate scenarios with his well-worn action figures where the good guy stands up for the little guy against the meanies. I watch him, listen to his stories, and I know, deep in my bones, that witnessing Ethan's quiet act of defiance, witnessing my calm departure, it shaped something fundamental within him. It showed him, far more effectively than any lecture could, what true strength, quiet courage, and gentle integrity look like in action. One night, a few weeks ago, while we were brushing our teeth side by side, looking at our reflections in the slightly steamy bathroom mirror, Noah looked up at me, his expression serious beneath his foam mustache. "Mom," he asked thoughtfully, "are you still sad about what Aunt Sophia and Grandma Eleanor said at the wedding?" I paused, rinsing my toothbrush, considering his question honestly. "Not anymore, sweetie," I replied truthfully, meeting his gaze in the mirror. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, a little white dot of toothpaste clinging stubbornly to his chin. "Because," he said with the simple, profound wisdom only an 8-year-old can possess, "I think you won, even though it wasn't really a fight." His words stayed with me, echoing in my heart. Because he was absolutely right. I didn't win by yelling back. I didn't win by trading insults or sinking to their level. I didn't demand justice or make a public scene or break down crying. I simply stood up, held my son's hand, chose self-respect over their toxic brand of acceptance, and walked away from the poison. And someone else, someone completely unexpected, someone who could have easily stayed silent, decided that complicity wasn't good enough anymore. Ethan didn't just stand up for me, he stood up for decency. He reminded everyone in that room, and everyone who watched that video later, what real support, real love, real integrity actually looks like. Not the performative kind that wears an expensive tuxedo or walks down a flower-strewn aisle, but the quiet, courageous kind that sees someone being hurt and says, firmly, unequivocally, "No, not today, not on my watch." If I've learned anything from all of this, it's this. Being alone doesn't automatically mean you're unwanted or unworthy. Being kind in the face of cruelty doesn't make you weak. Often, it's the hardest, strongest choice. And dignity, once you reclaim it, once you decide you deserve it, becomes a powerful, internal shield that no amount of external mockery can truly penetrate again. So no, I didn't get to dance at my sister's wedding. I didn't catch the bouquet or cry happy tears under twinkling fairy lights. But I did leave that reception hall with something far more valuable, far more lasting than fleeting social approval. I left with my head held high, my wonderful son holding my hand, and the deep, quiet, unshakable certainty that I no longer need to explain or justify my existence, my worth, or my choices to anyone who refuses to see them. That, perhaps, was the ending no one in that room expected, and exactly the one I and Noah deserved. If this story moved you today, if you've ever been made to feel small, silenced, or less than in a room full of people who should have had your back, please know this. Your voice matters, your dignity absolutely matters, and you are not, and never were, alone. If you found strength or resonance in Olivia's story, please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up by hitting that like button. It truly helps these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Consider sharing it with a friend or family member you think might benefit from this message today. And please, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone unexpectedly stood up for you? Or perhaps a time you found the courage to stand up for yourself against the odds? I'd love to hear about it. And finally, if you want more true-to-life stories that explore resilience, challenge expectations, and remind us of the complexities and triumphs of the human spirit, please subscribe to the Life Stories channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community.